It began with a whisper in a hall of 500 people. It ended with a truth buried under the concert hall stage. A truth I was never meant to see. My assistant didn't see a monster in the dark. She saw the space where a man should have been, and that empty space stared back. The air in the Grand Ethelred Concert Hall was thick with the scent of old paper, lemon polish, and a palpable, shimmering anticipation. It was a smell I associated with serious faces, expensive perfume, and the rustle of programs. Tonight, however, it was the backdrop for a professional courtesy. "Is this really all for the research, Mr. Vance?" Anya whispered, her voice hushed with awe not from childhood, but from the sheer scale of the privilege. I looked at my research assistant. Anya Petrov was 22, a brilliant, pragmatic graduate, student in musicology with nerves of steel and an eye for detail, or so I'd thought. Her dark hair was pulled into a severe but elegant knot, and she clutched a small notebook like a shield. Her presence was a professional necessity. I was Leo Vance, a freelance archivist, and my latest commission was to trace the provenance of several donated musical scores to the Ethelred Philharmonic, a night observing their performance in situ. The curator had insisted would provide essential context. "Every last velvet seat and golden note is part of the job tonight," I said, adjusting my glasses. "Consider it fieldwork." We found our seats in the middle balcony, perfect for seeing the entire sweep of the orchestra below. The musicians were tuning a dissonant, beautiful cacophony. Anya's keen eyes scanned the sections, her fingers twitching as if she could already see the notes on the staff. She was here to observe technique, cohesion, the physicality of performance, data. "The second-row cellist," she murmured, not pointing, but nodding subtly. "His posture is impeccable. Textbook perfect. You rarely see that level of controlled stillness before a performance." I followed her gaze to the man she indicated. He was perhaps in his late 40s with sharp, elegant features and dark hair swept with a touch of silver. His eyes were closed, his cello held as if it were an extension of his bones. His name, according to the program, was Silas Crane. "He looks focused," I agreed, already mentally filing the detail away. The house lights dimmed. The conductor strode to the podium, and with a downbeat as sharp as cracking ice, Tchaikovsky's Pathetic A Symphony began. The music was a tidal wave. Anya was transfixed, but not with wonder, with analysis. I saw her jaw working slightly, mentally cataloging the bowing techniques, the dynamic shifts. She was the perfect, dispassionate observer. Through the furious first movement and the oddly graceful second, she was a statue of concentration. I turned my attention to the crowd, the ambience, the context. The third movement's triumphant march ended with rapturous applause. A deeper quiet settled for the final movement, the Adagio Lamentoso. The conductor raised his baton with the delicacy of lifting a sleeping child. The violins began a thread of sound so soft it seemed to come from the walls themselves. And that's when Anya's hand shot out. It wasn't a professional touch. Her fingers clamped around my forearm with startling force. They were cold. "Leo," she breathed. The word was a ghost of sound, a puff of air against my ear that held pure, undiluted panic. She didn't turn her head. Her wide, unblinking eyes remained fixed on the stage below, but the analytical gleam in them had been utterly extinguished, replaced by a terror so complete it stopped my heart. "Anya, what is it?" I whispered back. "Are you unwell?" She shook her head once, a tiny, mechanical jerk. Her grip tightened. "We need to leave. Now." Perplexement turned to alarm. This was a young woman who debated music theory with the fervor of a lawyer and had never shown a flicker of superstition. "The music, is it too much?" She finally turned her head. In the dim, reflected light from the stage, her face was a pale mask. Her expression was one of primal, animal fear, the kind that bypasses the intellect and speaks directly to the lizard brain. "It's not the music," she whispered. Her lower lip trembled. She leaned in closer. The next words she spoke were simple, but they unmoored me completely, sending an illogical, electric chill straight down my spine. "Haven't you looked," she breathed, "at that cellist's feet?" My gaze, which had been locked on her terrified face, slowly drifted downward. The cello section was bathed in a soft, warm spotlight. The musicians swayed as one. And then I saw him, Silas Crane, in the second row. His playing was flawless, his posture ramrod straight. But below the polished amber wood of his cello, where his feet should have been planted on the floor, where the hem of his black trousers should have met his shoes, there was nothing. Just the shadowed space beneath his chair, a pool of empty darkness. The legs of his trousers didn't rumple on the floor. They simply ended, suspended a clean, impossible 2 inches above the crimson carpet. A logical part of my brain, the archivist who demanded evidence, sputtered. A trick of the light, a shadow. But the chill in my veins was not logical. The emptiness was absolute. As if he felt the precise weight of our twin stares, Silas Crane's head turned. He didn't miss a note. His head swiveled smoothly, not towards the conductor, but up and across the darkened hall, directly to our balcony seat. The stage lights caught his eyes, and they glinted. They found mine, held them across a sea of enraptured strangers. And he smiled, a cold, knowing slice of an expression. It said, "You see me." Anya's hand was a vice. "Please," she pleaded, the word almost soundless. We didn't wait. As the final, dying notes faded, just before the standing ovation broke, I pulled her up. We stumbled out into the bright, mundane lobby. In the taxi, she was silent, shaking, staring at her own hands as if she didn't recognize them. At her apartment, she finally spoke, her voice raw. "I study the physics of sound, Leo. The physiology of performance." That was an absence. A literal, physical negative space where a man should be. It violates everything. We were tired. The light. "Don't," she cut me off, her eyes fierce now with fright. "Don't archive it away. You saw it too." I had. And for me, the archivist, it was an anomaly that could not stand. A tear in the narrative of reality. Anya, with her scientist's mind, had reached her limit. She had observed an impossible data point and now needed to retreat from the field. She asked to be removed from the project the next morning, her email formal and final. But for me, it was only the beginning. The smile haunted me, the cold, knowing acknowledgement. He had seen me seeing him, and I felt the bizarre certainty that our interaction wasn't over. A door had been opened, and I was now standing foolishly in its draft. I had to know who or what Silas Crane was. Leo investigates alone. He finds Crane's sparse history, the vanished predecessor Alistair Finch, and the legend of the hollow musician. The retired stage manager, Martin Croft, provides the key testimony. The pattern of oddities at the hall cold spots, electrical faults is uncovered through Leo's solitary digging. The chapter ends with Leo observing Crane's eerie, precise routine at the chapel, and witnessing the unsettling encounter with the second cellist, Jeremy Cole, confirming the entity's parasitic nature. Leo poses as a researcher and visits Crane at the chapel. The encounter is tense, cerebral. Crane speaks in riddles about resonance and voids. Leo secretly photographs the cryptic musical manuscript. Alone in his apartment, he struggles to decipher it until he remembers a former colleague, Eleanor Chase, the composer. He brings the photos to her, and she reveals the music's nature, a sonic ritual, a ledger of dates, a binding equation. The anchor described in the music is the very cellist's chair in the Ethelred. Leo receives the warning note. Some voids are not meant to be filled. He is followed. Undeterred, he breaches the halls, archives, and discovers the blueprints for the sealed resonance chamber. His cross-referencing reveals the full, tragic history of Emil Voss, the 19th century composer whose hunger for perfection created the eternal, hollow entity. Leo understands the upcoming anniversary performance of the Pathetique. is a feeding cycle. He realizes he cannot stop it alone. Leo must enlist help. He returns to Martin Croft, appealing to his loyalty to the vanished Finch. He also goes to Eleanor Chase, appealing to her understanding of the musical equations and her sense of justice for the art itself. Reluctantly, they agree. On the night of the performance, the three of them break into the sealed sub-basement. The notice of Crane's retirement appears. The anomalies cease. Leo visits the empty hall, finding peace in the ordinary silence. Weeks later, he receives a postcard from Anya, who has taken a research fellowship abroad. It reads only, "I heard the news. I hope you found a better ending than the one we saw." Leo files the Crane Voss dossier away in his mind, his world once again grounded. The story ends with him at his archivist's desk, the mundane noise of the city outside his window a comforting, solid reality. Here is the complete story. The empty chair, revised with a young woman, Anya, integrated throughout and with all parts fully written. The silence in my apartment after Anya left was different. It wasn't the quiet of an empty space, but the ringing silence that follows a thunderclap. Her final, frightened words, "Don't archive it away," echoed. But that's exactly what I had to do. I just needed the correct file. The city library's historical archive was my sanctuary. The morning after the concert, its familiar scent of slow-decaying paper and ozone from the microfilm readers was a cold comfort. It was now a crime scene, and I was both detective and sole witness. My target, Silas Crane. My method, the paper trail. Public records were the first, thinnest layer. Crane owned the deconsecrated St. Cecilia's Chapel on the city's northern fringe, purchased 15 years ago for a suspiciously low sum. Before that, a 10-year void, no property, no taxes. Before the void, a birth certificate for a Silas Crane, born 52 years ago, parents deceased. School records stopped at 18. The biography was a palindrome of emptiness, a life constructed around a central gap. Employment records at the Ethelred Philharmonic were more revealing. He joined as principal cellist 15 years ago, following what an internal memo called a unanimous and electrifying audition. His predecessor, a man named Alastair Finch, had vanished 6 weeks prior. The police investigation, gleaned from digitized newspaper archives, had gone nowhere. Finch's prized 19th century cello had vanished with him. The case grew cold, and the symphony, desperate, hired Crane. I needed human testimony. I tracked down Martin Croft, the Philharmonic's retired stage manager. In a riverside bungalow choked with memorabilia, Crane. Martin said over a whiskey, his voice a rumble of nostalgia and peat smoke. A genius. Tone like dark honey and heartbreak, but odd. Rehearsed at hours God forgot. Crew hated being on stage with him alone after midnight. Lights would dip. They'd hear echoes, notes that weren't in the score, hanging in the air after he'd stopped. And Finch, the one who disappeared. Martin's face clouded. Alastair was a friend. A good, solid player. Then one day, poof, coat and street shoes left in his locker, like he'd stepped right out of them. He leaned in, lowering his voice. The audition, though. That was the thing. Crane played Finch's part flawlessly. He had his mannerisms. The head tilt on the B-flat in the Brahms. The tap of his pinky before a difficult shift. We all saw it. We all chose to call it musical empathy. The music was otherworldly. He gave the legend a name, the hollow musician. A ghost story among stagehands about a presence that fed on performance, that could mimic and replace. My digital digging revealed a pattern of small, rationalized failures around the Grand Ethelred. Unexplained power drains localized to the stage grid 3 in 15 years. A patron's complaint about a bone deep cold spot in the lower balcony during a winter concert. Our seats, I noted, and a union log entry about persistent, anomalous acoustic feedback. In the cello section's monitors during pianissimo passages, circumstantial evidence. But to an archivist, a pattern is a thesis. My thesis: Silas Crane was an entity with a history, a presence, and a modus operandi. The next step was field observation. For a week, my car was a silent sentinel on the gravel lane overlooking St. Cecilia's Chapel. The building was a stark, Gothic cutout against the perpetually gray sky. No smoke, no lights at dusk, no signs of life. Crane's routine was metronomic. He arrived just after 10 p.m. in an anachronistic black sedan. He never carried an instrument case. He entered, and a single, cold blue-white light like captured moonlight would ignite in the main hall. It extinguished at exactly 3:17 a.m. He left at 7:15 a.m. On the fourth night, the rhythm broke. The light burned past 3:17. At 3:45, the side door opened. Crane emerged, followed by a man moving with the stiff, somnambulate gait of a deep sleepwalker. They walked to the edge of the overgrown churchyard. Crane stood facing the man, motionless, for 10 minutes. The man then turned, walked to a car, and drove away. I recognized him from the orchestra roster, Jeremy Cole, second chair cellist. The paper 2 days later noted his sudden leave for exhaustion. It was maintenance, feeding, the entity was tending its garden, and the smile in the concert hall had been a receipt. I was now on the ledger. Passive observation had reached its limit. I needed to get inside. I crafted a persona, Dr. Leo Vance, University of Northbridge, studying acoustics in repurposed sacral spaces, bland, academic, plausible. Crane's response was a single typed line on heavy, unwatermarked paper. You may visit Thursday at 4 p.m. Do not be late. The interior of St. Cecilia's was a shock of silent cold. The stone floors were bare, the pews gone. Only a single, high-backed wooden chair stood in the center of the nave, and a grand piano shrouded in a white sheet. The air wasn't just still. It was acoustically dead, as if sound went there to die. Silas Crane stood beside the chair. He wore simple clothes, but here, in his sanctum, he looked more real and yet less substantial. A high-definition image with nothing behind it. Dr. Vance, he said. His voice was the cello-given speech, a vibration felt in the sternum. You are interested in resonance, in how space holds or fails to hold sound, I replied, brandishing my notepad and a useless decibel meter. This space holds nothing, he said, his dark, reflective eyes fixed on me. It is a perfect vessel. All creation requires an emptiness to fill. He gave a tour of silence, pointing out where echoes should have been and weren't. I noted he never sat. He never offered me a seat. His polished shoes were firmly on the ground. Here, he didn't need the performance. In the former sacristy, now a stark study, I saw it. On a broad oak desk lay sheets of handwritten musical manuscript. The notation was a frantic, dense storm of black ink. But within the storm patterns, alphanumeric codes woven into the staff. I glimpsed 102 3208, tangled in a spiraling arpeggio. The date of Alastair Finch's disappearance. As Crane turned to gesture at a stone arch, I fumbled my phone from my pocket, snapped 3 quick photos, and slipped it away. You seem distracted, doctor, he said, not turning around. The silence is profound. It is the silence before the note, he replied. The necessary void. Remember that. I drove away, my skin crawling, feeling those depthless eyes on my back until the city lights swallowed me. The photos were blurry but legible. I needed an expert. I thought of Anya, but her path was closed. Instead, I went to Eleanor Chase, a composer and former colleague, whose mind lived in the abstract architecture of sound. Leo, this is sinister, she said, peering at her screen. It's a composition, but it's also a schematic, a sonic equation. Her fingers flew, translating pitches to numbers. These clusters are dates. These harmonic progressions aren't expressive. They're functional, prescriptive. For what? For binding. for resonance of a very specific, localized kind. She pointed to a repeating, dissonant motif in the bass clef. This is an anchor, a musical description of a physical location, a precise point on a stage, a chair. She shivered. This music isn't for an audience. It's instructions. It's meant to be played to something, to activate it, or, she swallowed, to feed it. The confirmation was a cold stone in my gut. Crane was a ritualist. The music was his liturgy. The Grand Ethelred was his church. The reaction was immediate and elegant. The next morning, a cream-colored envelope lay on my doormat. No stamp, no address. Inside, the same heavy paper, with a single line of sharp, black script. Some voids are not meant to be filled. Cease your inquiry. Then, the man in the gray coat. A nondescript shadow on the opposite subway platform. In the back of the cafe, a silent, persistent punctuation marked to the written warning. Fear said stop. The archivist screamed that I was centimeters from the primary source. The answer wasn't with Crane, but in the hall itself. I needed its bones, its blueprint. Using my credentials, I descended into the Grand Ethelred's basement archives. A catacomb of dust and forgotten grandeur. Under a water-stained tarp, I found the chest of brass-bound architectural drawings from the 1953 renovation. On yellowed vellum, I traced the lines of foundation and conduit, and on sheet M7, structural amendments and sealed compartments, I found it. A chamber, not a basement, but a sub-basement, drawn in faint, dashed lines. A shaft led down from the stage's undercroft. It was labeled, Resonance Chamber sealed per Architect's Directive Number 12. Directive Number 12 was clipped to the sheet. The architect's note was unnervingly emotional. The foundational chamber exhibits anomalous acoustic properties that destabilize the structure above. It must be permanently sealed, its entrance bricked over, its existence omitted from all future plans. No performance, no vibration must reach that space. The void had an address. That night, cross-referencing dates from Crane's musical ledger with hall records and city archives, the full narrative coalesced. The hollow musician wasn't Crane. He was the current tenant. The story began in 1891 with Emil Voss, the hall's first principal cellist, a composer of minor talent and major obsession. In pursuit of a perfect note, a transcendent union of soul and sound, he performed a rite of sonic alchemy in the hall's foundation. He succeeded only in hollowing himself out, becoming a vessel for his own hunger and eternal, empty resonance that needed to be fed. It fed on the passion of performance, and when it grew hungry, it sought a new vessel, consuming a musician's essence and wearing their skill and form like a skin. Alastair Finch had been its previous meal. Silas Crane was the skin it wore before that. It wasn't evil. It was a wound in reality, a self-perpetuating absence, and it was starving again. The anniversary performance of the Pathetique, the very piece during which its void had been glimpsed, was the next scheduled feeding. The symphony's profound, collective sorrow was the richest possible fare. I wasn't hunting a monster. I was documenting a haunting, and I couldn't close the file alone. The night of the anniversary arrived, draped over the city like a velvet pall. I stood across from the Grand Ethelred, watching the glittering crowd stream in. Inside, Silas Crane would be taking his seat, his feet hovering 2 inches above the stage. I had recruited 2 reluctant allies, Martin Croft, for his love of the vanished Finch and his master keys, and Eleanor Chase, for her understanding of the sonic equations, and her moral outrage at the corruption of music itself. For Alastair, Martin had grunted, handing over the keys. Eleanor had simply said, no one should be a prisoner of their own art. We met in the alley behind the loading bay. Martin disabled the alarm. We slipped into the backstage gloom, a world of rope and shadow, the muffled sound of the orchestra tuning a distant murmur. Behind a rack of forgotten flats, we found the newer brick wall. Martin's key turned in a heavy padlock. Behind the metal door was not a room, but a descending tunnel of raw brick. The sound faded, then vanished. We entered a zone of absolute acoustic null. The resonance chamber was a natural cavern capped by a brick dome. In the center, on a stone plinth, stood the anchor. It was a cello, ancient and decaying. Its wood was black and cracked. One frayed string hung slack. It radiated a silence so profound it felt aggressive. As the distant applause for the symphony's third movement rumbled down the shaft, the air thickened. The lone string on the ghost cello began to vibrate violently, producing no sound, only a visible, frantic blur. Then he was there. Silas Crane materialized before the plinth, not the polished musician, but a flickering negative. His edges bled into the darkness. The void beneath his trousers was now a consuming maw, creeping upward. Only his eyes remained sharp, glowing with that cold, reflected light, fixed on me. Archivist, the voice was in the stones, in my teeth. You document the empty. You give it shape. You feed it with your attention. I'm giving you a name, I said, my voice swallowed by the hungry silence. I held up my sheaf of papers, the research, the translated ledger, the architect's plea. Emil Voss, this is your story. It's known. The flickering form recoiled. Names are noise. Stories are chains. I am the note, the eternal vibration. You were a man who loved music too much, Eleanor said, her voice soft but clear in the dead air. You tried to become it, but you only became the silence it leaves behind. The entity wailed, a soundless pressure that made our ears bleed pain. The ghost string thrummed. Above, the Adagio lamentoso began. A palpable mist of sorrow seeped down, and the void around Crane darkened, drinking it greedily. It's feeding, Martin hissed. The pact wasn't on paper. It was in the wood, in the last string. As the symphony's climactic grief built above, I knew. This wasn't an exorcism. It was a severance. You wanted to be remembered, Emil, I shouted into the silent scream. This is not remembrance. This is a prison of your own making. Let it go. I stepped forward, past the flickering horror. I raised my heavy flashlight. I looked at the ancient cello. This sarcophagus of stolen artistry and consumed lives. The note ends, I said, so the song can belong to others. I brought the light down. It didn't shatter. It unmade. With a dry, sighing rasp, the cello dissolved into a cloud of fragrant dust. The string snapped with a quiet pop. The entity froze. The consuming void imploded. For 1 second, he was solid, a thin, weary man with long gray hair and the sad, gentle eyes of a 19th century romantic. Emil Voss. He looked at his hands, solid and real. He looked at me, and for the first time, there was no cold smile, only a profound, weary gratitude. He opened his mouth as if to speak, or to sing one last, true note. Then, as the final, despairing chord of Tchaikovsky resonated through the stone far above, he faded, not into nothing, but into quiet, like the last, pure vibration of a string finally allowed to rest. The oppressive silence lifted. The air was just cold, damp air. Above, we heard the stunned hush of the audience, then the roaring wave of the standing ovation. The notice in the art section was brief. Silas Crane, longtime principal cellist of the Ethelred Philharmonic, has announced his immediate retirement due to health considerations. The orchestra wishes him peace and quiet. The cold spot in the balcony vanished. The backstage lights behaved. I completed my archival report for the Philharmonic, a dry, factual document that made no mention of voids or 19th century composers. The curator was satisfied. Weeks later, a postcard arrived. A generic cityscape on the front. On the back, in familiar, precise handwriting, it read, Leo, saw the news. I trust your filing system is now in order. Some data points are best recorded and sealed. I hope you found a more complete ending than the one we glimpsed. Anya. I placed it in the small drawer, where I keep personal curiosities that defy categorization. I still visit the Grand Ethelred sometimes. Not for concerts, but at midday when it's empty. I sit in the silent balcony and listen. I listen to the absence of a hungry silence. I listen to the peaceful, ordinary quiet of a space that is, once again, just a building. The archivist's drive is to file things away, to close the folder. The folder on Silas Crane, on Emil Voss, on the hollow musician, is closed. The narrative has been repaired. The void I witnessed was filled, not with a monster, but with a resolved chord. Sometimes, that is the only answer that matters.